Good evening, friends. The sun has set, and I'm back with another tale from my collection. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the night with a story I call Field Trip. Today was supposed to be a very special day because our school was going to visit a place only spoken of in whispers by most adults. The Rainbow Valley. It was rumored that there were amazing things to see and special foods to eat that could only be found there. They said there was one leafy green plant that grew there and only there that had a taste which was indescribable but heavenly. Some called it the manna of the gods. It was also rumored there were giant creatures there unlike anything we had ever seen. Some with many arms and sharp, pointed beaks which would rip the unlucky to shreds. It was said there were others so long that when you saw their long faces filled with rows of sharp, pointed teeth, you could not see where they ended. We had also heard there were very small monsters which looked like the manna, but when you tried to take a bite, many long, spindly arms would reach out and grab you. Not only that, but if they grabbed you, many tiny spines would erupt from the arms to sting you, injecting a paralyzing poison before dragging you inside to be devoured. When I was very small, before I was allowed to go to school with the others, my father would tell me stories of these creatures. He said their arms were twice as long as me. Scary. Then there was the red dust, which sometimes moved like clouds through the area, soaking up all the oxygen and making it impossible to breathe. I was told if I ever saw the red dust clouds to move away as fast as I could, or I would die choking for oxygen. Several times I woke from nightmares trying to catch my breath after hearing that story. When I first joined the school, I met another boy named Billy who said he once moved through the edge of one of the red clouds as it drifted across where he was playing. He said it made his whole body go numb and his head felt light. He said it was actually a really nice feeling and he wanted to go back, but his father dragged him away. It was only after his head cleared that he realized he almost died and his father saved him. In the time before I was old enough to go to school, I was scared of the Rainbow Valley. It made me wonder who in their right mind would ever want to go there. But as I grew older, I realized there were dangers in everything we do. I began to understand that we can do most anything we want to as long as we are aware of and look out for those dangers. To not experience what life has to offer because of fear of danger is to deny oneself life. Like any other morning, I gathered with my family for breakfast before I raced off to school with the others. Despite my underlying anxiety, I was excited about our trip to Rainbow Valley. It was as much of a coming-of-age thing as it was a field trip, and I was ready. So, here I was with my school, heading to Rainbow Valley. We were instructed to buddy up, and I was allowed to pick my best friend Billy to be my partner for the day. It was clearly stated that while we were at the Rainbow Valley, no one was to go explore anything without their partner, and it would be best if we went with at least one other team, as there was safety in numbers. We stopped at the end of the path and looked down the hillsides to see the Rainbow Valley below. It was beautiful. About halfway down the sides of the hills, golden sand reflected the sun shining down from above. In places, the light caught the sand just right, and there were sparkling glitters of light, as if from precious gems. On all sides of the valley, and even to both sides of where we were at the entrance, large gray rocks towered above. The rock faces contained many facets, as if carved with a chisel by some artisan to perfectly catch the light. It was almost as if the walls surrounding the entire valley were one large castle. Where the sand stopped, lush green plants grew. Towering above the valley floor, the larger plants seemed to reach for the heavens as they protected the smaller plants below. In places, there were bare patches where sand filled in to create soft, bright areas which reflected the light to the underside of the plant life. Hollering with joy and anticipation, we rushed down the slope to the valley. Our chaperones followed, but did not restrain us at all. It was as if they knew this experience must be an unfettered learning experience. Billy nudged me to one side in the direction of something he saw, and I happily followed his lead. We soon found ourselves standing before a plant I had never seen before. Its base was white, and there were broad green leaves sprouting up from the center. We each took a bite of the leaves, and I thought I was in heaven. I cannot describe the taste, but it was smooth and silky on my tongue, almost melting as I chewed it, and flavor seemed to erupt each time my teeth crushed the leaf. It was so good. After a few moments, I noticed Billy was not near me, and I looked around. He was a good way away looking at another plant which had red and blue stalks. Something in my mind said that this was one of the little monsters which would try to grab us, and I moved quickly toward him. Just as he started to take a bite of one of the stalks, I roughly shoved him away as more stalks shot out to grab him. That was close, and I almost lost my friend. He smiled sheepishly and followed close to me as we explored more of the valley. I noticed most everyone was gathered at the bottom of the valley, and no one was going up to check the small cupped plants which grew near the border where the sand stopped. I wondered why, as they looked absolutely delicious. I nudged Billy and we moved toward these newly discovered gems. I approached the cup-shaped plants cautiously, unsure if some unknown stalks or something might emerge from the cup shapes. Looking closely, I saw the cups were actually filled with water and what seemed to be tiny shrimp. I gently bit at the edge of a cup and was rewarded with a pleasant taste. I waited a moment to see if there was a delayed reaction to some toxin, but there was not. I took a larger bite and enjoyed the taste. It was kind of crunchy, but not too hard, and had a smooth taste that resembled a cucumber. One of the shrimp-like creatures slipped into my mouth with the next bite, and I was pleased. It tasted like shrimp. Swallowing that bite, I sucked in some water where several of the shrimp were. I could feel them wriggling on my tongue as I squirted the water out between my teeth and began to chew. They were delicious. Seeing my enjoyment, Billy moved close to the plant beside mine and began to eat as well. I could see he was really liking the little shrimps as he was ignoring the plant itself. Happily, we munched until I noticed a shadow moving down the slope above us. I looked up to see a long silver monster had emerged from a hole in the rocks. It was only sticking its head out and some of its neck. The nose was very long, and while I was looking up from below it and sure it could not see me, I shuddered in fear when I saw the teeth protruding from its upper jaw. Those teeth were as big as me and Billy combined. Just then, I heard one of our classmates calling to us from behind and turned to see him coming toward us quickly. I did not understand how he did not see the monster above us as he came quickly. When he was close enough, the monster shot its neck out and snapped him up in its jaws. I could only watch silently as blood erupted from the teeth and drifted down to us. The monster quietly retreated into the rock as if it had never been there, and I could only look at the opening and shudder. I looked over at Billy. He was shaking and stared wide-eyed with his mouth half open. I could see bits of the shrimp creatures in his teeth. I nudged him and nodded toward the valley floor, afraid to make any noise. He nodded and we slowly moved toward a group of others nearby. As we approached the others, I noticed they were all staring up behind us and seemed to be frozen in fear. I wondered if the monster had emerged from the rocks again and started to quicken my pace. Then one of the girls screamed and ran away. I turned quickly to see what was behind us, just in time to see a large white claws descending and wrapping around Billy and I. We were quickly picked up and taken into the sky. The pressure dropped around us as we were lifted higher and higher until I feared we would touch the sun. I could not breathe. I panted as fast as I could, but I could not get any air. I looked over at Billy, and he was panting quickly as well, but also getting no air. He started to turn a bit blue. We stopped moving up and were suddenly thrust to the side. I do not know if it was just lack of oxygen affecting my brain, but I suddenly realized we had been picked up by a giant being. I saw his face, and he was smiling. At first, I wondered how he could be smiling when he was suffocating us, and then I realized this was God. The hand of God had plucked us from the world, and we were on our way to heaven. God is a large white guy with a scruffy beard, bushy eyebrows, and a cigarette hanging from the corner of his mouth. Smoke lazily rose from the cigarette in wisps, and I watched the hellfires rage in the end of it as he sucked in hard. Please do not touch me with those hellfires, I prayed. Then we were falling. It seemed we fell away from the face of God forever, and I felt myself starting to black out. Then the air started to thicken, and I felt myself impact something. When I opened my eyes, I could breathe again, and I seemed to be in a large glass jar. I rolled over and nudged Billy. He opened one eye and peeked at me. "Is he gone?" Billy whispered. I looked around and could see God standing nearby the jar where we lay. I shook my head and indicated where he was. Billy opened his other eye and rolled over to look. He seemed to be studying the giant figure and then got up to look closer. I got up as well and moved over to the side of the jar. It seemed as though we were in a strange place where there was no air outside the jar we were in. I looked down, but could not see the world I knew. There was only some type of flat, gray rock under the jar and all around us. Then God picked up the jar and a stick and began to walk. He carried us along the flat rocks for quite a long time before stepping off to one side and sitting down beside the jar. Then I saw his massive hand reaching toward us, and I cringed into a corner. As his fingers reached down toward us, I ran away from them, but could only go in circles. Several times I felt the fingers touch me and start to close, but I was able to slip away just in time. For several minutes that seemed like an eternity, I evaded those fingers until Billy was not so lucky. The fingers closed around him, and I watched helplessly as he was drawn up out of our life-giving environment into the airless heavens above. I watched as God's other hand came to meet the one which held Billy, and a curved piece of metal was thrust through his side and out the other. He screamed breathlessly, and I saw his eyes widen. Blood ran down his side, and I wondered what he had done to deserve such a cruel fate. He had dodged death once before when his father saved him from the red sand cloud, but this time it seemed his fate was sealed. The hand holding him opened, and he began to fall with the curved metal protruding from his side. But he was falling in the airless space, not back toward me. Then suddenly he swung in an arc, and I saw there was a clear rope tied to the metal. What was this cruel torture? Just when I thought it could not get any worse, he was suddenly pulled back towards God, swung in an arc over his head, and thrown away faster than I could see at first. I looked to where he went, and watched him fall through the heavens back to the world from whence we came. Was he going back as a lesson to others? I lay down to rest. I was shaking and scared. What was to become of me? I had watched my best friend suffer a horrible fate, and now I was alone, in a jar as the captive of what seemed to be God. But he was a cruel God. What about everything I learned as I grew up about the one loving Creator? How could this be God when I was taught that God loved his children? I began to wonder if somehow This was not God, but just another monster. No one ever told me there were monsters that could reach above the heavens and take us to where there was no air to breathe. I thought about the manna and the cup-shaped plants where I found the little shrimp-like creatures. I realized I was getting hungry and wondered how long it was since I was taken. It seemed a lifetime had passed as I lay in this jar next to the monster. Then I noticed the light beginning to fade, just as it did at home when night came. Was I condemned to stay in this jar forever? What had I ever done that was so bad in my life that I was doomed to an eternity of isolation? This is not what I expected heaven to be. A sudden movement at the edge of my sight caught my attention, and I saw the stick the monster carried was shaking. The monster picked it up and started waving it to and fro as his hands did something out of my sight. This went on for a short while, and then I saw the long silver monster that ate my schoolmate come flying at the monster which kept me in the jar. The monster reached out and grabbed it from midair and bashed its head on the gray stone beside my jar. Several of its long teeth broke off to lay scattered before me, and I watched as it was smashed against the stone again. It lay there, defeated. I wondered what made the silver monster think it could beat the larger monster. How had it even known to enter the heavens to find it? Then the monster reached down and twisted a silver piece of curved metal from the silver monster's mouth. As it came free, I felt the bile rise in my throat as I fought to keep from being sick. My friend Billy's face was impaled on the piece of curved metal. One eye was missing, and the other hung from loose strands of meat from the socket. His mouth was open in a perpetual scream. The monster pinched Billy's face from the metal and threw it onto the gray rock, amidst the shattered teeth of the silver monster. Then I knew the end was near as it reached for the jar. I knew the fingers were coming in for me again, but I was too tired and scared to care. Let this nightmare be over, I thought. I closed my eyes and resigned myself to my fate. But I did not feel the fingers close upon me. I felt nothing except movement. I was being lifted up and then sideways. Then I felt myself falling as the air around me dissipated, and once again I could not breathe. Was this the end? Was I just going to choke to death instead of being impaled and fed to a monster? Once again, I felt the sensation of blacking out, and then I could breathe again. I looked around. I was back in the world. I was not sure where in the world I was, but I was free, back in the world. I quickly moved over and hid myself within some nearby rocks so I would be safe as I thought about what to do next. I had no idea where I was, but I was alive and unhurt. That was a good start. Now I needed to get home. The light was dim, and I knew it was night. I thought about my mother and father and all of my siblings. Surely they must all be wondering what happened to me. The chaperones on the trip to Rainbow Valley probably explained what happened to my parents, and most likely I had become one of the unlucky who succumbed to the dangers of that trip. Would they talk of me like they did some of the others who never returned? Or would I be one of the nameless who was forgotten? If I could find my way home, then I would be able to see what they were saying and thinking. What stories would they make about our capture? I wondered if others who perished before me had these same thoughts. I was pretty sure Billy was not having these thoughts, since his face was laying on the gray rock while the rest of him was presumably in the belly of the silver monster with my other schoolmate. Or was he watching me from heaven now? The real heaven, where we go when we die. Would he look down on me from time to time to see what I was doing? I fell asleep wondering these things. I awoke in the morning with the sun shining brightly on the rocks where I hid. That was good because I knew the sun shone from my right when I woke in the morning. Moving out away from the rocks, I turned to put the sun on my right and looked behind myself. The direction I needed to go was along a cliff that extended further than I could see. I began moving toward home. It was a long journey, but I managed to get home before the sun set. There was much rejoicing and happiness when I entered my home. My mother said it was a miracle and that her prayers had been answered. No one questioned where I was or had been. I was given food and put to rest for the night, safe in my own home. The next day, I told my story for the first time, and now I have told it to you, just as I have many generations before you. Be not afraid when you go visit the Rainbow Valley, but be mindful of the dangers. There is no reward in life if you do not challenge the dangers. So go, eat of the manna and the tiny shrimps. Play with your friends on the sparkling sands. But keep an eye to your surroundings to know where the dangers are, and you will come home, just as I have, my young minnows. Thank you for spending your time with me. Tell me what you think in the comments, and I'll be sure to join the conversation. That's all for now, but I'll be back again soon with another story, just for you. Until then, sleep well.